Greetings and welcome to another video. Today we're going to take a look at what I consider the 5 worst things about Star Trek Online. This video was much harder to write than the last one, and after thinking about it a lot, I found that some of my answers surprised me. Maybe they'll surprise you too, let's find out. Number 5, the bugs. Good golly Miss Molly, is this game filled with bugs, and I'm not talking about the Herc. I realize the developers do fix bugs, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not mad at them. They can't magically make more time in the day appear to fix these bugs, but that also doesn't fix the bugs either. I'd much rather them fix bugs than not, but there's something very wrong about the spaghetti code that makes up this game. It feels like one of those cartoon gags where you plug one hole in the ship and 2 more burst open. The game is filled with dozens of different systems that seem to be connected in highly dubious and questionable ways, that were developed by people who've long departed the team, that the remaining developers have to handle with the care of an explosive ordnance expert, despite constantly having it blow up in their faces. Some bugs are easy to look past, others are practically crippling and make the game nearly unplayable, if not just unenjoyable. There's also a large amount of emergency maintenance that takes the game down, sometimes multiple times in a week, but I must admit that it's usually overlapping with the time I have to play, so maybe that just makes me a little extra salty. Number 4, the artificial restrictions. There's something odious about some of the design decisions in the game, and while they do relate to monetization, that's not what this list item is about, but don't worry, we'll get there. In my opinion, a free-to-play game should offer a complete and compelling gameplay experience while enticing you to buy things you want but don't need as you become more invested. On some level, Stowe does do a good job of this, and their model is actually quite fair compared to a lot of other games, mostly due to the core components being designed for a subscription model. However, there are some lingering choices that need to be re-examined. Why do I have to pay to lift my EC cap? Why is there an artificial cap that low in the first place? Why do I have to pay to respec my skill tree? Why are there so many purchases required to increase our inventory, bank, and ship storage to a reasonable size? Why is there no account bank as default? Why do they sell us outfit slots? I could go on, but you get the idea. They artificially restrict you in some way just so they can sell you a solution to a problem they created. A problem which has absolutely nothing to do with the game or the gameplay. It's just a blatant matter of intentionally annoying you so you'll pay them to stop. This kind of obnoxious model was born out of mobile games, and it has no place here or in any game for that matter. The only thing that I should be able to buy are things that I want to enhance my experience, not bribes so the game stops artificially kneecapping me. Number 3, everything is obtuse. It's a good thing that the community for this game is so strong and has gone out of its way to provide as many resources as it has, because otherwise you'd have no idea what's going on half the time. The tutorial system is extremely rudimentary, and oftentimes the examples you find in-game are bad. They tell you when you have a new system unlocked and generally point you in the right direction to fiddle with it in the menus, but any explanation of how any of it works is basically absent. I don't blame people giving up on this game if they haven't reached out online looking for help, or even if they have, they may look at the mountain of things they have to read just to get started and just nope on out of there. I've been struggling with my DPS Guide series because explaining how this game works is a monumental task, and those of us who try get very little help from the game itself. Thank Q for all the people who painstakingly sussed out the details on their own. On their shoulders we still stand to this day. Number 2, the monetization. I know what you're thinking. How is this not number 1? Well, that's because I believe the number 1 item is actually responsible in a lot of ways, or at least exacerbating a lot of the things on this list. And while I've learned to live with Stowe's shortcomings, it's the one thing that actually concerns me. However, we're going to get to that in a moment. For now, let's rant about monetization. In some ways, I don't blame Cryptic. Being profitable is not enough for something to exist. It also has to be profitable enough that you couldn't make a bigger profit by using those resources to do something else instead. They didn't invent all of the bullshit in the gaming industry, they just have to compete with it. They also seem to be making efforts with the legendary bundles and Mud's Market to get away from lockboxes. Whether that's because of growing regulatory pressure or a genuine effort to listen to player feedback is kind of irrelevant. They are still doing it. Having said that, there are choices that are kind of inexcusable. While it's true that a large amount of the profits come from a small number of players, they shouldn't be targeting gambling addicts to get there. Not all whales are part of the 1% with disposable income to throw around. Some are drowning in debt and stuck in a feedback loop of buying gambling items to give themselves a high so they feel better, then suffering crippling guilt over it, which leads them back to more gambling to make themselves feel better. Have you ever wondered why it's so much cheaper to sell keys on the exchange to buy a ship rather than opening the boxes yourself? Because some of the people opening the boxes are opening such a huge amount that they end up with multiple ships. And since they can't fly them all, they sell the rest on the exchange, probably to buy more keys. A person who just has money to burn isn't necessarily going to spend it stupidly. The situation is what it is because gambling addicts are encouraged to waste their money that they don't have in order to get less value than they deserve so that they can get a high off of winning the prizes in these boxes. It's about the least Star Trek thing I can imagine, well, unless you consider the Ferengi to be the height of Star Trek. If it doesn't disturb you, then it should. I mentioned that they're making efforts to move away from gambling, which is good, but some of the prices are farcical. The reputation buyouts, for example, were particularly egregious. And another example of selling a solution to an artificial problem. The difference this time is that it isn't a problem at all. There's nothing wrong with unlocking reputations the old-fashioned way. That was a legitimate in-game activity, even if it was boring. Offering people a way to pay huge amounts of money to skip playing the game is tasteless and exploitive and offensive. I mean, getting marks to do your reputations is a way to get people out there playing the game. So instead of preying on people who want to gamble, they're now preying on people who are impatient. It's all just emotional manipulation. They try to find some emotion they can latch onto and crank the wheel on that to get you to pay in a moment of weakness. Just offer us fair products at straightforward prices. Mud's Market may be a ripoff, but at least it gets that part right. I hope they move in the right direction with monetization in the future. No more of this rep buyout crap, because there's still a lot of work to do. I could spend hours on this topic, but you get the idea, so let's move on. Number 1. The small size of the player base. Yes, that's right. The fact that Stowe has such a small player base only exacerbates many of the problems on this list. If Cryptic makes a brand new ship or some new story content, it's basically a flat cost. We aren't consuming physical products that have a marginal cost associated with materials and production, outside of a bit of electricity and server costs. If the player base were 10 times bigger, they'd be bringing in 10 times more money for virtually no cost. They'd have more money to spend on bug fixes, on developing content, they could hire more people, they could make enough money from the minnows that they wouldn't have to depend on whales to keep the books in the black. The reason we have so much gambling and huge bundles that cost hundreds of dollars is because they need each customer who's willing to buy to spend large amounts of money. A favorite refrain on Reddit is that they would make more money if they just put the new hotness in the C-store for a reasonable price. Well, my friends, Cryptic and CBS aren't stupid. The entire game industry has spent a lot of time and money on talented people to work these things out. What is more likely, that given their financial information and their player base, that their current operating model is based on known practices that generate the most revenue, or that some guy in his basement on the internet just knows better because reasons? Common sense isn't always right. Getting a small amount of money from a large number of players just doesn't work unless you have a lot of players. The only option then is to squeeze the customers you have left for more money. The cycle continues until you end up in a farcical reality where a small number of whales are keeping the game running for everyone else. This overdependence on whales is a direct consequence of our small community size. If we had a lot more players, they would have other options. Whether they would take them is another story. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here. However, I will say this, Cryptic does deserve credit for trying to fix this problem. When I started playing the game, it was far more bleak than it is now. Content releases were down to a few times a year. There was nothing to do at in-game except red alerts and ISA. There was no console version of the game, the combined total of which now exceeds the PC version for player size. There was no Endeavor system, no random TFO system. It was pretty bare bones. We got more C-Store releases, but they were mostly bundles of 3 ships that were nearly identical to each other. They have done a lot, and clearly invested a lot into getting more people playing the game, and it's worked. You can argue that this is in self-interest, casting a wider net catches more whales, but the reasons don't really matter. What matters is that it's been successful, just not successful enough yet. It's obvious that whales still comprise the backbone of their business model, and until or if the player base grows enough for them to move past that, which I will consider to be the day when a gamble ship on the exchange is equal in value to the keys needed to win it, or the day when large bundles have their individual items sold separately, we're still on thin ice. It may be too late for an 11-year-old game, even one with Star Trek behind it, to recover its player base to the point where it doesn't have to milk whales anymore. The scary part is that today, as has been the case for many years, the existence of this game rests not with the average player or the developers, but the whales. A large migration someday to greener oceans could kill the game. The Klingon recruitment event brought in a lot of people, and yet developers are still being pulled to go work on the Magic the Gathering game. A few underperforming quarters could make them decide to maintenance mode us and send all the development resources to a new game. I really hope that this game is healthy enough or can get healthy enough for that not to happen, but I'm not convinced we're there yet. I've ended on a pretty sour note, but I have to say that while the negatives are, well, negative, I didn't come away as angry at Cryptic as I thought I would. The game has improved since I started playing it, and they've been taking steps to address some of the bigger problems, no matter how imperfectly. A lot of the things that really make me angry can't fairly be placed solely on their shoulders. We live in a world of great income and wealth inequality where the game industry has gone insane with greed. I know a lot of developers are good people. I saw Kale cry on stream when they removed the Foundry. Given the circumstances, I think they could be doing a lot worse, and I don't think fixing all of the problems with the game is actually within their power. All we can do is keep playing. The game has more to offer than its flaws. When you see something you want, and it's offered at a fair price, then buy it. Otherwise, don't. Nothing good can last forever. The game will shut down someday, but if we sit and doom and gloom and wait for the sky to fall, we're only going to make it happen faster. Let's focus on the positives instead. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go play some Star Trek Online.